All right, so picture this. You wake up, get your coffee, sit down at your computer, and check your email. But instead of seeing your usual inbox, you see a message that just makes your heart sink. Something like, your account has been compromised. Ugh. It's a security breach, and it's happening to you right now. Scary thought, right?
It is. It is.
Well, today on Technically You, we're going to help you navigate this whole messy situation. And we're not just going to talk about theory, we're going to get practical, right?
Absolutely.
What can you actually do to not just survive a breach, but minimize the damage and maybe even learn something along the way?
It's all about being prepared, right?
Exactly.
It's like having a fire escape plan for your house. You hope you never need it, but if you do, you're really glad you thought about it beforehand.
Exactly. Okay, so let's say the worst has happened. You've discovered a breach. The guide starts with stay calm, okay? Easier said than done, right?
Much easier said than done, of course.
Why is that so important in those first few moments?
Well, if you panic, you're much more likely to make a mistake. Make a rash decision, maybe even accidentally delete something crucial. Oh yeah, you really need to have a clear head. That's where an incident response plan comes in.
So it's kind of like having a roadmap for dealing with the crisis.
Yeah, we discussed an incident response plan in one of our earlier podcasts, but yes, you don't have to reinvent the wheel in the heat of the moment. You need to have an established plan.
Right. You know what to do. Okay, so one of the first steps on that roadmap I see here is changing your passwords.
Yes,
Not just changing them, but making them strong and unique.
right.
Okay, we've all heard that advice before, but why does it suddenly become even more crucial after a breach?
Well, think about it. Even if an attacker's already in the system, changing your passwords can still limit how much damage they can do. They could be using your existing passwords to extend the breach.
Really?
Yeah. Imagine they've got like a key to one room in your house. You might not be able to kick them out immediately, but you can at least change the locks on all the other rooms to contain them.
Right.
That's what changing your passwords does.
Okay.
It contains damage.
So it's damage control.
Yes. It makes it harder for the attacker to move around freely.
Okay, so you've calmed down, you've changed your passwords. What's next? The guide talks about assessing the damage. Ooh, this is where it gets kind of interesting.
It is like detective work, You're not just patching things up. You're trying to figure out exactly how the breach happened, what attack vectors were used.
Right.
Was it a phishing email? A weak password? A website visited? Or maybe there's like a vulnerability in some software you're using.
Ooh, I bet a lot of our listeners right now are sweating a little bit, thinking, wait a minute, am I doing all the right things to protect myself?
Well, it's a good wake-up call for sure. Recognizing those vulnerabilities is the first step towards actually fixing them. Now, one mistake I see a lot of people making at this stage is that they skip a very crucial step.
What's that?
Documentation.
Oh, really? That seems like something like only tech people would have to worry about. Why is it important for everybody else?
Well, it's your proof. It's your timeline of what happened. Let me give you an example. There was this case a few years back where a company got hit with ransomware. They paid the ransom, got their data back, thought that was the end of it. But then they got sued by their customers whose data had been leaked. And the company had no way to prove that they had taken all the right steps after the breach, to protect that data because they hadn't documented anything.
Oh, they didn't write anything down.
No, and that documentation could have saved them a lot of money and legal trouble.
Wow, that's a really powerful example.
It is.
So it's not just about being a good IT citizen. It's about protecting yourself legally.
Absolutely. And think about it. What if you need to file a cyber insurance claim after a breach?
Oh, right.
Good documentation helps you tell a clear, convincing story. Like, this is what happened, and this is what we did afterwards.
Okay, so we've contained the initial damage, we've assessed the situation, we've documented everything. What comes next?
Now we come to the part where a lot of organizations really struggle with notifications. Our resources are very clear on this point. Transparency is key.
But we all know how hard it can be for companies to be open about this kind of thing. Yeah, especially if it involves sensitive customer data.
Sure.
I mean, nobody wants to admit that they messed up, right?
Of course, there's fear of reputational damage, legal repercussions, even like stock market impact. We have seen market reactions to several major breaches. But think about the ripple effect. Internal teams need to know what happened so they can take action. Customers need to know what data was compromised so they can protect themselves. So many.
So it's almost like a chain reaction
Yes, it is.
where hiding the problem just makes things worse in the long run.
Exactly. And legally, there's a good chance you might have to report the incident to certain organizations, depending on the type of breach and what kind of data was involved.
So, who are we talking about here? Who needs to be looped in?
It can really vary, but in the US, for example, data breaches involving health information often have to be reported to the Department of Health and Human Services. If it's credit card information, you might need to notify the card brands, the
FTC, and if there's suspicion of criminal activity, we're talking about law enforcement, right?
Absolutely. If there's evidence of hacking or intentional data theft, you need to report it to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center or your local police department. You know, it's about understanding the legal landscape, knowing who needs to be informed.
So it's not just about fixing the technical problem, it's also about navigating this whole web of legal and regulatory requirements. Yeah, that's a lot to think about on top of everything else. Okay, so we've contained the breach, we've notified everyone. Hopefully, we've started to address the legal side of things.
Right.
Now, how do we actually get our systems back up and running? I mean, that's got to be the next priority, right?
The documents puts it pretty simply, restore from backups.
Oh, okay.
Sounds straightforward.
But hold on, there's got to be a but here.
Well, the catch is those backups need to be clean.
What do you mean?
Imagine restoring your computer from a backup that also had malware on it.
Oh, no.
Right, you're just bringing the problem right back in.
So it's not just about having backups, it's about having backups you can trust.
Exactly. Regular security practices like scanning your backups for malware is essential. It's like checking the life raft before you jump ship. You want to make sure it's actually going to float.
That's a good analogy. Okay, so we've restored from clean backups. Things are seemingly back to normal. What else does the guide recommend?
They talk about monitoring for further activity. This is a step that so often gets overlooked.
So even if we've restored our system, we can't just assume that everything's fine and dandy, right?
Right.
What does this monitoring actually look like for someone who's not an IT expert?
Think about it this way. You've just had a break-in at your house, okay? You fixed the broken window, but you're probably still going to be a little bit on edge. You might be extra careful about locking your doors, checking for anything suspicious.
So we're talking about like being extra vigilant,
Exactly.
looking for any signs that, the attacker might still be lurking around.
Right. Pay attention to things like unexpected or multiple logins, especially from unusual locations. Keep an eye out for files being mocked, modified, or deleted that you didn't touch. Even if your computer is suddenly running slower than usual, that could be a sign that something's up.
All right, we've explored quite a bit so far. Immediate actions, assessing the damage, notifications, even getting our systems back online. But the documentation, it goes a step further. It talks about learning and prevention. It seems counterintuitive, but how can something bad, like a security breach, actually lead to something good?
It's all about turning a negative experience into a learning opportunity. By analyzing what went wrong, you can actually identify weaknesses in your security and make improvements for the future.
So it's like, okay, we messed up, but let's figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Exactly. Or at least minimize the impact if it does happen again. And that's where the postmortem comes in. And it's not about assigning blame or anything like that. It's about understanding what was the root cause of the breach. As we stated earlier, was it a phishing email that slipped through, a software vulnerability that wasn't patched, someone bringing in an unsanctioned device, or maybe a weak password that was easily guessed?
And this applies not just to like big organizations, but to individuals as well, right?
Absolutely. Even if you're not, a tech expert, if you've been through a breach, taking the time to reflect on what happened and how you can improve your own security habits can be incredibly valuable.
I like that. So even if you haven't been breached yet, what's one key takeaway from this conversation that you can apply to your life right now?
Oh, I have been breached in the past, and honestly, the first action I took was to change to strong and unique passwords.
Okay.
And I recommend that you enable multi-factor authentication wherever you can. Those two things, honestly, they are the foundation of good security hygiene. It's like washing your hands. It's simple, but it can prevent a lot of problems down the road.
Simple steps, big impact. I like it.
Exactly.
But it's not just about the technical stuff, is it? It's about staying informed and like aware of the threats out there.
Right. Recognizing that security is an ongoing process. With polymorphic malware and AI, one must stay ahead of the bad guys.
Okay.
The threat landscape is constantly evolving, so we have to evolve with it.
And maybe that's the biggest takeaway of all, right?
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground already, but we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll dive even deeper into more recommendations from the guide. We'll explore how to shift from just reacting to attacks to proactively preventing them in the first place. Stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned.
We will be right back.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how a security breach can feel like a sudden earthquake just shaking up your digital world.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But what if we could learn to spot those tremors before the big one hits?
I like that.
Yeah,
And that's what I think a lot of our listeners are hoping for, right?
yeah,
Is to move from that feeling of being a victim to feeling a little more in control.
exactly. And that's where this whole idea of like proactive security comes in.
Okay.
It's not just about waiting for something bad to happen. It's about building a strong defense from the ground up.
So where do we even begin? Well, the documentation talks about the importance of a security mindset.
Right?
What does that even mean?
It's about, just weaving security into everything you do online,
Okay.
making it a part of your routine, almost like brushing your teeth. It starts with just recognizing that cybersecurity is ongoing.
Okay, so it's not like I install an antivirus program and I'm good to go forever.
Oh, I wish it were that easy.
Hey, so do I.
The threat landscape is constantly changing. New viruses, new scams, new ways of exploiting vulnerabilities. It's a never-ending game of cat and mouse.
So how do we keep up? Like, what are some actual concrete steps people can take to build this proactive security mindset?
Well, the guide recommends doing regular security audits.
Okay.
Think of it like a checkup for your computer and all of your online accounts.
So just like we go to the doctor for regular checkups, we should be doing the same thing for our digital health and home.
Yeah, exactly.
What does that actually look like, though?
Well, it can involve things like scanning your computer for malware,
Okay.
checking your privacy settings on social media, making sure all your software is up to date.
Oh, the dreaded software updates. I know. I'm guilty of hitting remind me later way more often than I should.
We all are. We all are. But they're important.
But why are they so important from a security standpoint?
Well, think about it like patching holes in a fence, right? Hackers are constantly looking for those holes, those vulnerabilities in software. And a lot of times those updates contain the patches to fix those vulnerabilities. So every time you postpone an update, you're leaving that hole in your fence open just a little bit longer.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so regular security audits, keeping our software updated. Yeah, got it. The guide also mentions something called using advanced security tools. What are some examples of that? And is that just for big companies or can everyday people like us benefit from those too?
Yes, we can all benefit from taking the same approach as the big guys. So you've got your basics, firewalls, antivirus software, but there are also more advanced tools that can be really helpful for anyone. For example, have you ever heard of endpoint detection and response?
Endpoint detection and response? Is that EDR?
That's it.
That sounds pretty high tech for a home network.
It is, but it's very useful. Imagine you've got a security guard, right? And they're not just like standing at the gate. They're actually patrolling your property, looking for anything suspicious.
Okay.
That's kind of what EDR does. It's constantly monitoring your computer's activity in real time and can actually like detect and respond to threats as they happen.
So it's like having this extra layer of defense.
Yes, exactly.
Something that's like constantly on guard, looking for those things that might slip through the cracks. EDR is now available to consumers and can be loaded on your smartphone, laptops, tablets, and desktops. So, are there other tools like that that regular people should know about?
Yeah, there's also intrusion detection systems or IDS.
IDS.
Yeah, it's like a burglar alarm, but for your network. It can alert you to any kind of suspicious activity, like someone trying to log into your computer from some random location.
Okay, so all these tools sound really powerful, but I'm guessing they come with a pretty hefty price tag, right, Bjorn?
Well, some of them, an enterprise level solution can get expensive, but there are also plenty of affordable options that are designed for everyday users. For consumers, it's about finding the right balance for your needs and your budget.
So it's not about going overboard and buying every fancy tool on the market.
Right,
It's about, educating yourself, understanding what's out there and choosing what makes sense for you.
exactly.
Okay, what else does the guide highlight when it comes to proactive security?
Well, they emphasize something we've already talked about a little bit, backups. Okay, I know it sounds a bit boring,
Yeah.
but backups, they are your safety net.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier in the context of like recovering from a breach,
Yeah.
right? But you're saying they're also important for preventing them.
Absolutely. Think about it. Even with all the best security in place, you can't completely eliminate the risk of an attack,
So it's all about having that plan B,
right?
that way to restore your data if something goes wrong.
Exactly. It's like having insurance for your digital life.
Okay.
And the key is to have regular and secure backups.
Remind us again, what does regular and secure access actually mean when we're talking about backups?
Regular means like backing up your important data, at least once a day, if not more often.
Right.
Secure means storing those backups separately from your main computer.
So not just copying everything to a USB stick and like leaving it in my desk drawer.
I mean, it's better than nothing, but not ideal. Think about cloud storage or even like an external hard drive that you keep in a safe place. Some people use the 3-2-1 method, which is creating 3 different copies of your data to put on 2 different storage types and keeping 1 copy off-site. By doing so, you'll be able to create a fail-safe system that keeps your data safe. Also, encrypting your data is essential.
How does that fit into the picture?
Encryption is basically like putting a lock on your backup.
Okay.
It makes sure that even if someone gets hold of your backup drive, they can't access your data without the key.
So it's like adding like an extra layer protection,
Exactly,
even for your backups.
right?
Okay. Regular, secure, encrypted backups, check. Anything else we should be thinking about when it comes to preventing these breaches?
The guide ends with a piece of advice that honestly I think is the most important,
Okay.
and it's often the most overlooked. We touched on it earlier, and that is stay informed.
Okay. Because the bad guys aren't exactly standing still, right?
No, they're not. New threats are popping up all the time, so it's crucial to stay up to date, on the latest scams, the latest vulnerabilities, the latest security practices.
So where do we go to get this information? Are we talking about reading like cybersecurity journals and attending like hacker conferences?
As you know, it doesn't have to be that intense. There are actually a lot of great resources out there that are really easy to understand. Organizations like CISA, the FTC, they regularly publish alerts, advisories about current threats.
And I bet there's some good podcasts out there too.
I'm sure there are,
The key is just to find sources that you trust
right?
and make it a habit to just check in regularly. It's kind of like reading the news, but for your digital life. So it's about being proactive, not just with our technology, but with our knowledge as well.
Yeah, right.
The more we know of the threats out there, the better equipped we are to actually defend against them.
Absolutely. Knowledge provides power. And, that applies to cybersecurity just as much as anything else.
Well, this has been a long conversation, from the importance of regular security audits to the power of those backups to the need to just stay informed. But when we come back, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about what happens when, despite our best efforts, that breach still occurs. How can we make sure that we're not just like surviving these incidents, but actually learning and growing from them? We'll dive into that and more when the podcast returns. Welcome back to the podcast. We've been talking a lot about security breaches, how to prepare for them, all that good stuff. But let's be real for a second. Even with the best defenses, sometimes stuff still happens.
Yeah, it happens. You can't predict everything, right?
Right. And it's in those moments, when you're picking up the pieces after something like that, a shift in mindset can make all the difference in the world.
I think so. It's all about how you react to this situation.
The guide talks about every breach being like an opportunity.
Yeah,
I'll be honest, that sounds a little bit counterintuitive.
right?
How can something as disruptive as a breach and damaging as a breach be a good thing?
I think it's about perspective. Instead of looking at it like a failure, we can look at it as a chance to learn,
Right?
Improve, come out stronger on the other side.
So it's like that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah, but how do we actually apply that to the world of cybersecurity?
It all starts with a really thorough analysis after the fact, like a post-mortem.
Okay.
Not to point fingers at Bob, just kidding, Bob.
Right.
But just to understand what happened, how it happened, and what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen again.
And so we're talking about going beyond just fixing the problem.
Right.
We're like digging deep to figure out the root cause of the breach.
Exactly. Was it the items we mentioned earlier in our discussion?
Right.
By finding those weaknesses, we can really target our efforts.
This is where that good documentation comes in handy, right?
Yes.
We talked about that earlier, how important it is to document everything that's happening during a breach. Now we see how all those records can actually be super valuable later on.
It's like having a map. It helps you retrace your steps,
Right.
figure out where things went wrong.
And the cool thing is, this applies not just to organizations, but regular people too.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you're not a tech whiz, if you've had a personal security breach, taking some time to think about what happened can be really helpful. What could you have done differently? Are there any security habits that you can tighten up?
So you're saying we can all learn from our mistakes, even when it comes to cybersecurity?
For sure. Even if it's something small, it's still a valuable lesson.
I like that. Turning a negative into a positive. One of the things I really liked about the guide is how easy it is to understand. It really breaks down all these complicated security concepts into plain English.
I agree. I think it did a great job with that. It's written for everyone, not just the
Techies, which is so important because this stuff affects all of us. We all need to feel like we can actually do something to protect ourselves. We're not just helpless victims.
Exactly. We have the tools, we have the knowledge.
It's empowering.
It is. And I think the more we talk about it, the better. The more we share these tips, these best practices, the more prepared we'll all be.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this podcast, as always, what's the one message you want our listeners to walk away with?
Stay curious,
Okay.
stay vigilant, and most importantly, never stop learning.
I like that. Knowledge is power, right?
It is.
And security, it's a journey, not a destination.
Well said.
Yeah. To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining our Technically You podcast on security breaches and what actions to take. Stay safe out there in this crazy digital world. We'll see you next time.